It is the most densely populated part of Canada and a critical region for Ontario's economy. And whether the Greater Toronto Area desperately needs additional transit or not isn't really in dispute. What is ripe for debate is how much is needed, where, how it's going to get done, and how much it's going to cost. Joining us now for their sense of what we've learned so far from the campaign trail, Tricia Wood, professor in the Department of Geography at York University, Ed Levy, transportation planner and engineer, and the author of Rapid Transit in Toronto, A Century of Plans, Projects, Politics, and Paralysis. Boy, doesn't that sum it up. And Ben Spur, transportation reporter at the Toronto Star, and it's good to have you three around our table here at TVO tonight. We're going to take each of the four major parties. We're going to go through some of their commitments that they've made on transportation, starting with the Liberals. And here's what they've got up their sleeves. Transit projects in the GTA include the Eglinton Crosstown, which is going in about $6 billion right near this studio, the Finch West LRT in the northern part of the city, the Hurontario LRT, which goes up from the lake through Mississauga on Hurontario Street, at the moment stopping at the border of Brampton because Brampton Council didn't like the route and therefore has not approved it. But that's what they've got mostly going on in the 416 so far. Ed Levy, let me get your sense about the breadth and the depth of the Liberal investments on transit. What you think?
The level of investment is certainly impressive. Whether or not it's on the right things in the right formation is another matter entirely.
Why do you say that?
Well, specifically, their slavish adherence to the Scarborough subway, the infamous one-stop wonder, is a constant mystery to me, but then again, I'm not a politician.
Well, you know, of course, that's Toronto City Council's decision to build that. The province is helping, of course, but it's their decision.
That's right, and I can't understand any aspect of that, as again, I say because I'm not a politician.
Tricia Wood, your view on the Liberal commitments?
Again, I think I would agree with Ed. The LRT investments that you listed are good. We noticed that the Shepherd LRT is no longer on that list.
How come?
It should be. Well, it's kind of been shelved to the side, partly out of political pressure and the open question about whether that's going to be a subway again. There's a lot of pressure from City Council and from some provincial quarters as well. I agree also that what's not on that list that the Liberal government is all about is the Scarborough subway, and then the recent pitch for the high-speed rail.
$11 billion.
21 if it goes all the way to Windsor.
If it goes all the way to Windsor, right. 11 goes what, Toronto to London?
Something like that, yeah.
Get you there. Ben, your view?
I would agree that there's substantial investments that the Liberals are proposing. I would add too that on that list there's the Regional Express Rail plan and the Smart Track plan that piggybacks on top of that. That's not a project, I guess, that is maybe talked about as much. I think there's still some sort of confusion among the public as to the details of that plan, what it actually looks like. It's harder to conceptualize, I think, than some of these other projects like an LRT, but certainly it is a substantial level of investment. I think the question with the Liberal policies are, have they chosen the right projects to pursue? I mean, the one-stop Scarborough subway is hugely expensive. There's plenty of evidence that an LRT would be a better option there. They're also, proposing to push forward things like the Yonge North extension, whether or not that's a project that we should be pursuing before the relief line is fully extended into the second phase.
Let's just understand that. That's from Finch up to Richmond Hill, I gather, going
That's
north?
right, yeah, that project there. Okay. So, and that would only add passengers, of course, to the already congested Yonge
right.
line.
I presume, I mean, the things that have irked all of you around this table here, namely the Smart Track and the Scarborough subway, are not on this list because those are decisions that in fact were made by Toronto City Council, yes, with provincial funding, but the province didn't actually decide to go ahead with those. So does that explain?
They didn't make the decision, no, but there's been extraordinary political pressure from both the provincial and the federal governments in the provision of funding and also around campaigns, really to push for subway to Scarborough. So City Council takes some responsibility, yes, but they're not alone in that.
Indeed. We have we had a town hall, Innis College Town Hall at the U of T the other day, and the former Transportation Minister for the province of Ontario, Stephen Del Duca, was one of our four guests on that. And here's what he had to say about the government's transit planning at that town hall. Roll it, please.
I would say it doesn't matter whether you're standing in Scarborough or Etobicoke or Vaughan or Ajax, anywhere in the entire region. The people that I represent in my community, they want the talking to stop. They want the endless debates about process and governance and what color is on the side of a train or a bus and who's on the board and who the chair is. They want all of that to stop. and they just want to know that their public transit system is working for them. So when the bus or the train or whatever it is supposed to arrive, and how long it's supposed to take, and what the fare looks like, and the fact that there'll be more of it coming sooner rather than later, that's what they want to see.
Ben, that has been the defense of the Scarborough subway, is that it's enough time of talking, it's time for digging.
Yeah, and I think that that argument's been deployed, on the Scarborough subway as well as on some other transit plans that the Liberals are proceeding on. This idea that we shouldn't be talking about governance, that we shouldn't be talking about the process, and to me, that the public should be talking about the process. I mean, how we plan these things is very important. This is tremendous amounts of money that we're investing into projects, and there's evidence on the Scarborough subway that that City Council, for instance, did not get the full information as to all the ramifications of that project. On the Regional Express Rail project that the Liberals have pursued, there's evidence that the minister himself intervened in order to get a station in his riding that was not recommended by Metrolinx's own studies. So, I mean, I don't know what the rationale is for not discussing topics like that. I mean, this is public money. These are public projects that are going to reshape the region for generations to come. I think we need to be talking about them.
Indeed. Let us talk now about the Progressive Conservatives, if we can. They made headlines the other day, Doug Ford, their leader, did, when he said that they wanted to upload subway infrastructure from the Toronto Transit Commission to the province, and they wanted to commit an additional $5 billion in new subway construction for the Greater Toronto Area. Ed, what's your view on that?
Well, $5 billion is a drop in the bucket these days, isn't it, for subway construction?
Might get you 2 stops.
Yeah, it can get you 2 stops, exactly. It's an interesting political ploy. The PCs have always been in favor of the Shepherd subway extension as a subway. There is absolutely not the slightest evidence of demand for a full-scale subway in that corridor, and is unlikely to be for the foreseeable future.
Meaning the numbers don't support it?
The numbers don't support it, just as much as the numbers don't support Scarborough as a subway, especially a one-stop subway. Interestingly enough, the people we've talked to from Scarborough, mostly general citizens of Scarborough, are suddenly realizing that they're going to lose all their intermediate stops on the RT. And most of them are absolutely horrified, mainly because they don't read the news, they don't really understand it, they have their own business to run.
Let's just explain this for people who live outside Toronto. There is a subway, it's an above-ground subway.
It's sort of a junior subway,
right.
yes.
It's been around
light
for,
rail, yeah.
Light rail. It's been around for 40 years.
That's right.
When it's wintertime and the tracks freeze, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it's there. And it sort of does the job most of the time, but that's what they want to replace.
It's exactly the same technology, really, as in Vancouver, where it works very, very well. It is the main trunk system in Vancouver. And had they spent the money necessary to upgrade it, and had the union allowed it to be fully automated like it was designed to be, we'd have a different opinion of that line today. And it should have been extended to Malvern years ago.
And therefore, we wouldn't be spending $4 billion on a new one-stop subway.
Yes, we may have spent $1 billion, which would have been $1 billion much better spent.
$5 billion more for subways. What do you think of that?
Again, it's a drop in the bucket. It isn't necessarily where the money should go. And I'd like to talk about the other part of his campaign about the governance question and uploading the TTC.
Just a little background first. Yeah. The Toronto Transit Commission has, it's subways, it's streetcars, it's buses, and it's always run its own affairs for, almost 100 years. Yeah. This would be a significant change proposed.
It is too, because the scale of the TTC, I think, is underestimated at the provincial level. The TTC carries more passengers every day than the entire collection of all the local transit, including GO in the rest of Southern Ontario. Like several times more. I think the TTC carries the equivalent of the rest of Southern Ontario within 2 or 3 months of the year. So uploading something of that scale to the province is a serious financial issue, but it's also a serious administrative issue, and I'm wondering what the consequences for the TTC would be there, and really why anybody thinks that's a good idea.
Well, I gather the thinking behind it, Ben, is that transit needs to be thought of more regionally now, as opposed to within just the boundaries of the 416, and therefore the province is in a better position to do that rather than City Hall.
Well, so my understanding of what the PCs are proposing, though, is they would take ownership of the subway lines, but the day-to-day operations and the revenue would still be handled by the TTC. So I'm kind of with Tricia on that. I'm not quite sure. The way they framed it, the benefit of that would be that it would be easier to finance subway projects.
And plan.
Yeah, and plan.
Especially if stops go beyond the borders of the 416.
Yeah, that's possible. But if the TTC is still running the day-to-day operations, they obviously still have to have a huge say in that. And also, I think the TTC is a very integrated transit system. The subway system is very integrated with buses, with streetcars that go right into the stations. And so to kind of sever the ownership of the transit assets in Toronto, you could see that there could be potential problems between having parts of the system run by one government and parts, or owned by one government and other parts owned by another.
Tricia, let me follow up on another angle here, which is the Liberals are using the line right now that you need to re-elect us if you want to see all of these projects go forward. That if Doug Ford and the Conservatives get in, there's no telling what will be canceled, because of course he's promised to find $6 billion in savings annually. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I think some of that's fair in that I don't know until we see a costed plan and how this is all going to work. I don't know that we have confidence at all the proposed LRT programs will go forward. Rod Phillips at the debate indicated that they...
It's the PC candidate for Ajax.
Yeah, so he indicated that they would support Finch West because it was signed. I don't know that the leaders confirmed that. But he did say that the waterfront LRT plans, he said that wasn't a priority.
Right.
So that looked like that was already off the list.
Yes.
So, with what confidence can we have in what they're actually going to
See, the
keep?
problem with the system here in our wonderful GTA is that it's been developed inside out and upside down, as I say in my book, for years and years. The downtown is full of elites who drink lattes on the terrace in the summer.
You've been talking to Mr. Ford again.
Yeah, and I mean, they really believe that. And they don't realize that a properly designed network, and that includes, of course, primarily the relief line, which has been talked about for 110 years. Without that, we don't have a network. We have a awkwardly designed system with a couple of horribly overloaded, under-designed interchange points. And unless you get rid of the silos, and the GO Transit in the province is one silo and the TTC is another, we're never going to get anywhere. And the very few interchanges between GO Transit and the TTC that do exist are awkward, and they're misdesigned, and they just don't work. They keep on talking about Danforth to Main Street in the East End. That's not an interchange, that's about a half a mile apart. And I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm not here to talk about details. But we do not have a network. Every subway system in the world that I know of, even the smallest of them, is a network. We have to go only a few hundred kilometers east of us to Montreal to see what a real rapid transit network looks like.
Indeed. With
well-spaced junction points, redundancy, choice of route in case of accident or breakdown, and so on. We don't have that.
Let's move on and talk about the NDP promises. And let's bring this graphic up if we can, because the NDP says it will build Toronto's, what some call the downtown relief line, others call the Yonge Street relief line, in order to take some pressure off that extremely overused line of subway right now. And they would build Hamilton's LRT, which is perhaps not a big surprise given that the leader of the NDP represents, or did represent, and hopes to be reelected in a Hamilton riding. Ben, your view on that?
Well, I think maybe the most significant portion of their platform, which wasn't listed there, is the idea of providing operating funds for municipal transit systems. So they would say that they would provide half of the operating subsidy to agencies like the TTC, and that would be a big change. Of course, it would take a lot of the costs off municipalities' hands. One thing, though, that's interesting is that the NDP is pitching that as that would lead to improved service within transit systems, but that I'm not sure that that's actually a guarantee, because obviously they would be providing more funding, but there's no guarantee that the cities receiving that funding wouldn't just take money they currently put towards transit and put it somewhere else. So there's obviously they would have more room to improve service if they wanted to, but I don't think the NDP's plan would necessarily lead to improved transit service.
Tricia, I think all the parties are pretty much saying that the Yonge Street / downtown relief line is a priority for them. But even if a shovel were to go into the ground tomorrow, which it won't, I mean, that's 2 decades away from being done, presumably, right? What can be done in the interim to actually improve things on that dramatically overused part of the subway system?
One of the things that can be done immediately is to improve bus service and to prioritize bus service. And I also agree that the NDP's emphasis on local transit is a good one, because also all the talk about regional transit, the network that Ed's talking about, won't really function as well as we want it to unless there's good local transit, you know, that it connects to. So, but it's not very exciting, it's not big and shiny, and it's not actually even that expensive. But improving, you know, buying more buses, paying drivers to drive them, and creating designated right-of-ways for them is one of the things you could do immediately.
Is that green?
It's relatively green. It's greener than individuals and private cars. Because one of the things that the Young Line, extending the Young Line to Richmond Hill debate opens up is the fact that there is also a lot of unmet demand on the Young Line. There are people, we can't afford you know, to extend it because it's already full. But even with the relief line, there's a lot of unmet demand where people are driving who live near the Young Line, but they can't get on the train in the morning. So if we move people off it, there'll be a lot more who rush in and fill it, right? And if it's already full, you know, with people coming from Richmond Hill, that's problematic. That's not, yeah.
Gotcha. Ed, your view?
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. The bus system is of prime importance. Regardless of what you see outside our doors here with this incredible density, most of Toronto is at a very low density for a major city. And that cannot be served by individual subway lines in the middle of a vast suburban landscape like Scarborough or North York. So buses are of prime importance, and as we just heard, there's no sex appeal in buses. And yet, as far as greenness goes, that is probably the first kind of vehicle that we're going to see become an electrified vehicle, and even an automated vehicle on its own busway, like bus rapid transit, BRT.
BRT.
So that's a very important thing, but it's not politically attractive.
Well, you say politically. Let me get you to focus on this aspect of politics. We had another group on this program tonight discussing the fact that, in their view, and this is one more rural politician in particular said this, in her view, there is such a focus on spending billions to help Toronto's transit that the rest of the province feels quite left out of all of that discussion. Are they entitled to feel that way?
Here, sitting in the middle of Toronto, where I've always lived and worked, it's easy for me to say, yes, they are not entitled, really. And it's not because of any fault in their characters. It's just that small cities and small towns, and certainly rural areas, cannot possibly support conventional transit of any kind, even buses. In these smaller towns. I mean,
but they would want that money for roads and bridges, though.
They would want that money for roads and bridges, and perhaps a sort of a dial-a-bus kind of situation like they're doing in Innisfil right now, which is a very old idea, but now with Presto and the incredible iPhones, it can actually be workable, and it's actually doing a very good job in Innisfil, bringing people to the trunk lines. So unfortunately, this does happen to be the center of the universe economically in Canada. I'm sorry, Montreal and other places that are listening. And we need this investment for all of us, everybody from coast to coast. And as far as the relief line goes, my God, that is the most poorly named line there ever was. It is not a downtown relief line. It is a network builder. It'll serve people who never even use the particular line in their daily work, because it will relieve the entire system. It's been needed for decades. It's been planned for decades under 10 or 12 different names. It keeps on coming up as #1, and then when the politics get hold of it, it loses its priority entirely. Unless that becomes priority 1, we are going to continue to be in trouble here.
Let us move on and finally talk about the Green Party. On this program, we have 4 major parties in the province, and the Greens get consideration as well. Here is part of what's in their platform. They would implement the expert recommendations for dedicated revenue tools. We're talking congestion charges, parking levies, no relation to Ed Levy, I don't think, and land value taxes to raise more than $3.9 billion per year, which would then go into building more public transit. This includes, Ben, things like tolling the 400 series highways that come into Toronto, which presumably drivers won't like, but presumably people will like the additional transit if that's what it goes to purchasing. What's your take on the Green platform?
Well, I mean, it's certainly, as you say, it's based on some expert recommendations for decades. You know, we've been debating this idea of should there be tolls in the GTA, and politically, it seems like an idea that the other three parties are not interested in, and therefore, it's pretty difficult to see it being implemented. But we had a pivotal moment last year where the City of Toronto went to the province and said, we'd like to toll our own highways here within the city, and that got shot down. So it seems like there's no appetite at the province generally to do that. But there's substantial evidence that it could lead to some, not only raise money for transit, but it could also do the thing that we don't seem willing to do in this part of the province to try to discourage people from driving and encourage them to take some other forms of transit.
Let me ask you about the politics of this, Tricia, because Kathleen Wynne tasked this expert panel to come forward with recommendations. She pledged, this is going back a few years now, she pledged that she would be bold and daring in accepting their recommendations, which included road tolls and all of what the Greens are championing here. And then she didn't do it. And I know for a lot of her supporters, that was a very sad moment. What's your view on the advisability of doing this?
Well, I think Kathleen Wynne has to keep an eye on her suburban base, because I know my suburban family members did not like the idea of tolls. They didn't like the idea that they might have to pay more to come into the city when Toronto won't set its property taxes at the same rates as its neighbors. So I think it kind of made it politically untenable for her to keep her suburban voters and approve it. It was also a particularly uneven plan. It wasn't actually tolling all of the highways that Toronto, like the Don Valley, but not the Allen.
Right. The Gardner, but not the 427.
Right. So it was an uneven, another plan, a congestion charge rather than tolling highways, a tax on the kind of the vehicle registration tax. There might have been other ways that we could have gone around it that wouldn't have aggravated the suburbs, and that might have been successful.
Do you give the Greens any credit for putting something forward that's maybe politically courageous but difficult to do?
Oh, a tremendous amount of credit. I imagine, without casting any aspersions, that they're being very frank and blunt because they know they're not going to be the party in power. But that's fine. I mean, I thought it was a very acceptable platform, frankly. We have to learn to spend money, unfortunately, and to put the money where it does the most good.
So you'd toll all the highways?
I would certainly attempt to toll the 400 series highways. It's very difficult to toll a highway that's been free for 50 years, though. That's free. Nothing's free, but I mean, it's free to the user.
Paid for through taxes.
Paid for through taxes. But the cost of them, the cost of maintaining them, as we all know from our trips on the 401, are just astronomical. Somebody's got to pay for it. We've all got to pay for it. And if it's acceptable to pay $3 to ride on the subway, why not a couple of bucks to use these very expensive highways?
Well, you asked.
To me, I don't see a problem with it, but I'm not a politician.
You asked the question, and Rod Phillips hopes to be a politician. He's running for the PCs in Ajax, and apropos of your suburban family members who didn't want to pay tolls, at our town hall yesterday, this is what Rod Phillips had to say about the advisability of tolling the 400 series highways. Go.
People, have to drive. I mean, there's no, many of my neighbors love to take the go down to downtown, but when they're taking their kid to a hockey game or going shopping for groceries or going to some places in the GTA, they don't have that option. And so what I hear at the doors consistently is about how expensive life has gotten, how it's difficult to afford things. And this is not frivolous things for families. This is paying their hydro bills, this is for food, and this is for recreation and getting to do the things the family wants. We don't believe tolls make sense because people right now can't afford them.
Does that not resonate with you?
Well, it's a matter of how often you use it and how much of a piece of the budget that those tolls are. He's absolutely right, by the way. I'm not of the PC persuasion, but he made a lot of sense. Transit is no good for taking the kid to the hockey game. I mean, that kind of trip in the suburban areas. It just isn't, and it never will be. Uber may have a profound impact on this. I don't know. I'm not going to be around to see it, probably. But basically, I think he's overdoing it when he says people can't afford them. I mean, we're not talking about $20 a day here. We're talking about a contribution that will help to create a more balanced transportation system, all modes, not just roads.
Tricia, we're down to our last minute. We've gone through some of the basics of the four-party platforms. Is there anything that wasn't in there that you wish you had seen in there?
Yes, actually, I wanted a clearer sense of the why. What problem are we solving? And so one of the things I wanted to hear more about was climate change and the need not just to build more transit, but as you mentioned, to get people out of their cars. Because we don't actually have much of a plan to reduce car share. We have these ideas, and there's a lot of talk about getting people out of their cars, but the same government that's talking about this, and Mr. Del Duca's comments, it's the same government that's also expanding highways. So I wanted a greater sense of what's the vision here, because if you have a transit platform on the one hand, but you're expanding highways on the other hand, there's an incoherence there that is upsetting to me as a geography professor.
Well, stay tuned. There's still 3 weeks to go in this 2018 election campaign. We thank Tricia Wood from York University, Ben Spur, the transportation reporter for the Toronto Star, Ed Levy, whose book, Rapid Transit in Toronto, A Century of Plans, Projects, Politics, and Paralysis, still is a pretty good read in 2018. How long ago did you write that?
3 years.
3 years ago. There we go. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming on to TVO tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.